Hi everyone, good morning. Thanks for being here at bright and early. Today we have Iskander Sanchez Rolla with us, who is the Director of Privacy Innovation at Gen. For those of you who are not familiar with Gen, previously known as NortonLifeLock, and now it's Gen. And he's done some fascinating work on web privacy. I think he's kind of a recognized authority in the space, and we're glad to have him with us to show us what the latest findings are from his research. So later on, we'll give everyone a chance to ask questions, and then I'll have a conversation with Iskander and drill a little deeper into these issues. But for now, Iskander, please take it away.
Thanks. So let's see if we can see the slides there. Okay, perfect. Here we are. So as Petros was saying, today we're going to talk about privacy, and specifically about this odyssey that I call here, like the different things that happens in privacy, sometimes not so obvious for everyone, and also about fingerprinting and how fingerprinting is changing many things on the ecosystem in general. So when we connect to the internet, there are many things that probably we think that they will happen. And probably one of them is that we will learn a lot of stuff, and then we will get a lot of knowledge out of it, which is actually true. But there are many things happening in the background that we are not aware of. So then we should make ourselves one question, which is, do we know who is actually watching us when we are online? And you may have your answers, but I would say that the answer is definitely no, we don't. Because it's not so easy, actually, not because you don't know how to do it. It's just because it's a very complex thing. For me, it was also the first time that I realized that the web was so complex and intricate. So there are many things happening there. So let's just start with an example. So let's imagine we go to a website. Let's imagine that we are watching the last NFL game from our favorite team, and we are watching it, and then everything is going all right in the game, and suddenly, touchdown, we are actually tracked. So what happened from the moment that we were visiting a website, we're watching our favorite team play, and then suddenly we are tracked? Like what happened here in the middle between this process? And this is what we will try to answer here today. So before talking of how we were able to understand this process, we have to explain a bit of the background on some prior work that happened here. So previous work primarily was analyzing and identifying the identifiers that were created on the website. So for example, one example could be a cookie. So we're checking these identifiers created on the website. It was easy to check. You just go there, see that they are there. And they were verifying if these identifiers were being actually sent to a third party or not. This is not bad. This was a good technique. You can see many things there. But definitely, this is not the best way. Why? Because this is oversimplifying what the web is, the web model in general is. Because in reality, it fails to detect these complex and intricate connections that happen, that normally they happen completely dynamically. Meaning you go to a website, don't think that a website is just an HTML file with everything. There are tons of files, tons of JavaScript being executed, that they are dynamically loading each other. So it's very complex. So what happens there is that if you just follow the previous approach, then the thing that happens is that you will miss many things and you will not be able to actually see what is happening there. So then what's our goal here? Just as I was saying before, our goal is to really understand how this modern tracking ecosystem works and answer those question marks that were appearing next to the visiting the website until you are tracked. This is what we are trying to see here. So what we do here is we examine millions of websites on the internet, the most popular websites around the world, the different pages inside those websites, and we capture and document every single interaction that these tracking companies are doing and how they are creating identifiers and how they are involved in all the process. We try to uncover, and we found actually that the network is super complex and is very intricate, and there are tons of relationships between different actors. So it's not a one-time thing. One single company does his own thing. The other company does his own thing. They are connected, and they interact between each other a lot, how we will see later. So how we do this? So we do this using a fine-trained tainting. So we analyze what is actually happening on the website, tainting every connections that happen. And we created two main concepts here. The first concept will be the tracking tree, and the other one is the tracking flow. So what are these things, right? So when we say tracking tree, it's a situation where we merge all the information that is happening from the trackers, so how they interact, how they create identifiers, how they set identifiers, and we merge everything with the hierarchical distribution of the page. So how all the different scripts that are running on the website are being loaded, how they are being interacted with each other. So we combine all these things, but also we take into account the flows. So how the information flows around the website and in and outside the website. So in this tree that we are generating, we annotate nodes, specific nodes, that generate these specific identifiers, and then we add edges to this when these specific identifiers are being shared, like inside the different scripts of the website or outside the website itself. So we try to understand everything that is happening on the website. So let's go back to what we were saying at the beginning. No? So this situation that you're just watching your favorite game until you are tracked. So when you are watching the game, you think that just is a video playing there. But as I said before, it's not a video playing there. There are tons of scripts. And some of them actually are not even loaded by the website itself. They are loaded by other scripts that the website loaded. So at the end, maybe from all these lists, maybe the website was loading the first three, and then this one was loading this one was loading this one, and at the end we create like a huge complex mess that sometimes when you ask to the website why this specific last script is there, they don't even know how to answer because it's very complex and there are all these connections happening. That's why it's needed to do something more than what it was done before. So we need some complex analysis that allows us to discover how this works. So all these scripts are, as we were saying, creating identifiers and also setting identifiers. These are the key things. Like when we mean identifiers, sometimes they could be, as I said before, cookies, some information that can be stored in different storage systems on the browser, or sometimes even fingerprinting, where we'll talk later more. So when we are analyzing how these are created and shared, we have to set different steps in this process. The first step of them is who is the one that initiates this explosion of connections that are happening and how all this data is finally shared. So we have to understand who is the one initiating this. Because if you ask to the website, they don't know the answer. So they need something that analyzes everything and all this information flow and all this tree to be able to tell them who is the initial responsible from this from happening. So this is what we call the initiator. Then we have actors in this ecosystem that they are running as intermediaries. So actually they don't create any cookie, they don't actually share any cookie at all. So everything is like they just there in the middle, allowing this to finally happen. So there are specific actors in the ecosystem that they never do anything. They just are there to help others become the initiators or the creators of the different information there. And finally, we have what we call the executor. And the executor is the one that finally performs the action that we are talking about. This could be, again, creating an identifier or setting the identifier. So just to give an example, in all this mess of scripts that we see in this website, we can say that, for example, the initiator was this one, then these two were working as intermediaries in the process, and finally this last script is the one that created the thing. This is very useful not only for the research itself and us to understand the system, but also these flows of information are very helpful for companies that they don't know what is happening in their own websites. So we perform this analysis on a website, we can tell you specifically what happened there and who were all the different actors that were involved, all the companies and how they came to be there and what they are doing specifically. And this is very important because this is what we need to understand ourselves as a companies and also tell our customers what is happening because transparency is key. So when we're analyzing this, we actually found different new patterns that were not discovered before because of this methodology that we are using. So because of this novel methodology, we're able to discover what we call ghosted tracking or ghost writers. So the idea of this is, if you think of a ghostwriter, is they are writing something in the name of someone else. So this is the same idea. So we have, for example, this tracker, not the one that we were talking at the beginning, and what this tracker will actually do is we create an identifier. Again, let's follow with the example of the cookie there. And it's creating the cookie in the name of this other file that in reality is not doing any tracking. So why they do this? The answer is obvious, like they want to avoid being detected. They don't want someone to detect that they are doing this because this can mean block, so they can mean that they are not loaded in this website anymore. So this is something that definitely trackers don't want. So how they do this technically is just they are being executed in the same context. Let's imagine the main website that you are in. And because they are being executed in the same context, they are technically able to generate cookies in that same context. Again, this could be the website they are in. So if you check what those cookies are, you will think that they are first-party cookies. But in reality, they are not. And they are being used by a third party, like this tracker. Or sometimes they are loaded by another tracker that they have an iframe, so again, and they load this one internally, and then they are again in the same context. So when they are creating these identifiers, they can look like they are the other tracker or they are the other company, sometimes not even a tracker again. So as we see, there is like a very complex thing. So we will try to explain the different roles that are happening here. So in this crazy ecosystem, there are things that they are definitely working as creators. They are principally creating the cookies or the identifiers, the fingerprinting. There are other ones that they are what we call senders, so are the ones that are sending this information outside the website that you are in. And sometimes they can even share both of them. So sometimes they are creating and sending their own cookies, but as we will see later in some examples, that's not always the case. And sometimes these senders are completely independent and they can send cookies from someone else, they can send fingerprints of someone else, and the first creator doesn't even know that this is happening, so they don't understand it. And to whom do they send this information? To the receivers, which again, sometimes they don't even need to be on the website at all. Like they are not executing absolutely anything and they are not being part of the decisions that are made on that website. So why they are receivers then? Because sometimes they have agreements with other companies. So one company can say, okay, when I'm identifying someone in this website, I will send you the identifiers so you can like match it with your identifiers in the future. So I'm like 50 websites, you are in another 50 website. If we join forces, we are in 100 websites. So they receive information that sometimes they are not even part of the website. So they are helping each other in order to like increase the coverage of the information they have about users. And then finally, again, we have these intermediaries, that they are full companies that the only single thing that they do is allow this ecosystem to exist. So they are the ones that they have connections with creators, they have connections with senders, and they are there in the middle to help each other and do as an intermediary. So let's give examples, right? Because maybe like me saying about all these things can be a bit confusing. So I hope like some examples will help clarify some of these cases. And these are real world examples that we found when we're doing our analysis. So for example, the first is about a gaming website, a popular gaming website that talks about games, that was actually loading some videos. For example, trailers of video games or gameplays of those video games. This specific company was creating identifiers. Initially, you will think that the only reason they are creating identifiers is to know like what videos were you watching, what point did you stop the video, or you continue the video, or some settings that you decide in the video, maybe mute the video, the volume or something, which actually they do, and it's true that they are doing this, so this is what this company was thinking. But again, they had an agreement, so what was happening there is that all these identifiers that theoretically they were only using for themselves were sharing it with someone else. So then, again, they were able to track people around as long as this company had some kind of video embedded in that website. And many times, the website were not even aware that this was happening. When we're contacting them, they were not aware that this situation was happening. And they were like, I don't have anything, I don't track anyone, I just have some videos there. So sometimes it's not easy to detect that this is happening unless you do a full analysis and understand why this is happening. Another one was this video chat website, so allows to talk people in video and interact with people with videos. And the situation was a bit more complex here. And here we can see that this website didn't like bots, which is fair, like they don't like people to go there that actually are not people. So they had some software there that allowed them to detect bots. So they were analyzing how you browse the website, how you move around. So again, they were not trying to track you, or that was not the main objective of this company. But also this website wants to do some analytics on their website, which is also fair. They just want to understand how the user interacts, so they don't want bots, and they just want to see something. But again, both of them seems pretty fair. This analytics website was creating some identifier inside the website to try to see, like, track all the behaviors between different pages of the website and see how the user is interacting with them and how they are doing things there. The interesting thing here is, as I was saying before, senders and creators are not always the same. So this bot detection service was very greedy. So what they wanted is as much as they can get from anything that was on the website. And these identifiers were definitely one of them, very interesting to have. So what they were doing is, as they were being run in the same context, both companies were running in the same main context of the website, this bot detection service was getting all the cookies and specifically searching for identifying cookies. So they had some code that were analyzing to see if that was some word or was some specific identifier from companies. They were extracting this information and sending them to themselves so they can get this extra information from everything. And here is more worrying because if you ask the company, they were not aware that this was happening. If you ask the analytics website, they were not even aware that this was happening either. So no one was aware that this situation was happening, except obviously the bot detection. Those ones, they knew what they were doing, right? So as you see, there are complex things already. And the last example before I explain a bit more of the details of the work is this news website. Again, very popular news website. And I imagine that you've seen before, this at the bottom of the page, there are these sponsor ads or sponsored news that they are there. Sometimes they don't anything to do with what you were reading, or sometimes they're even weird. Like, it's like, do I really want to click here? So those ones are very popular. I guess many of you have seen it. So what was happening here was a bit more complex. So what this website was actually doing, it was they internally, inside their iframe, were loading an advertiser. It was like, okay, this is a sponsor, it makes sense, they want to make money, so the company is paying them so they get some benefit. But again, they are greedy also. So they wanted to know more information about the user. So they include an advertiser in their page, and this specific advertiser was creating an identifier. Once more, you will guess it, right? And what they were doing here, again, in a different situation than before that were completely independent, this one, they know what they are doing. They are collaborating each other. So they are not waiting and stealing the identifiers between each other. They are friends. And they're like, okay, I include you, you include me. So this one is including this specific advertiser and getting the identifiers. And this specific reason is not to steal the identifiers from someone else, it's to match them. It's the case that I was talking before about maybe this company is in 50 pages, this other one is in 50. So they are matching their identifiers to be able to know, like, when you say 5, I mean 3. So every time I see 3 is your 5, is the same person. So I'm able to know that the user was in both websites. So it's increasing their coverage much more. So the next question I guess you have in your heads is like, how many websites are actually known for these trackers, which is fair. So what we did is we analyzed 250,000 users in time to understand how the information was being shared between these trackers and how they are obtaining with this methodology. And we found out that the most prevalent tracker, without naming anyone, has 64% of the browsing history of these users. So more than half of all the browsing history was already known by default, without any sharing at this point. 64% was known for that single tracker, which is quite a lot. The runner-up, not so good, but still nice, 30%. And finally, the third position was getting 23%. So many things were known to these people. So again, just by default, 64% of the browsing history, 30% of the browsing history, and 23% of the browsing history, which is quite a lot. And again, here we didn't even consider yet the information that is being shared between them. This is the most basic scenario. So how they are able to get as much information as this? And the answer is because they are in very prevalent websites. So in the specific case of the most prevalent one, that it gets 64% of the browsing history of this 250,000 people, it was in 40% of the top 1 million most visited websites. So it makes sense that they end up giving, but automatically, like a huge percentage of your browsing history, because it's highly likely that most of the websites you visit are in that range of the top 1 million websites. Maybe your gym, local gym is not there, but still they get many more things there, right? And probably they care more about these other pages than your local gym. So the second one, the runner-up, so it was 30% of the browsing history, is in around 18% of the top 1 million most visited websites in the world. But as we said before, this is not the only way. this data sharing infrastructure that they have between them allow them to know more than this 64, 30, or 23%. So if we consider how they share information, we see that when two organizations were sharing information between each other, let's say the case that I was showing with the sponsor ads and the advertiser, then these organizations were getting between 5 to 10% more each of them. So if one of them was getting like 30%, it will get like 35 or 40%. So they are increasing a bit, but still you think like, okay, not many. But this was the simplified scenario because many of them, they share between multiple of them. So they are not like niche collaborations between one company or the other one. They are collaborating between many other companies between each other. And in those cases, the increase can be up to 50% more. Sometimes these clusters can join people like big players with some small players. Maybe they got a good deal there and they were able to get more information about it. But sometimes there are many small players collaborating within each other. So if you individually analyze them and then you don't take into account how this information flows between them, you will say that all of them are like very small. They are really not able to do much to your privacy because they just know very small bits of your life. But when they are collaborating between each other, like the story is completely different and they are able to see everything that you are doing online. So we were talking about trackers and how these identifiers are there. But the next question is, okay, fine, should we only care about trackers or we should care about something more than trackers? So only trackers, the answer is definitely sorry, but no, again. So why is this important? Because trackers are not the only ones that they are interested about our identifiers, our fingerprints. Who is also interested in this information? So the answer is malicious actors. Also, they are very interested on this. And this is also a new thing that we were discovering when this was happening, how the ecosystem changed for malicious actors. So now security and privacy are more connected than ever. So when you go to a malicious website, not on purpose, of course, or that's what I hope so, many things can happen, but you think that normally they will steal your username and password, let's say your credentials to access a website. Let's just follow the example of a phishing page. So you go to the phishing page that is trying to impersonate your bank. So you think that what that page will actually do is they will try to just get my username and password, which definitely they will. But this is not the only thing they do. They also care about your identifiers, and more specifically about your fingerprint. So now, apart from getting your information of your username and password, they will also get these identifiers. So the next question here is like, why? Like, why do they care about these things? And I will give you the answer in a sec. So when they get this information, let's imagine the bank case of the phishing page. So they go to your real bank. So this is the real bank. So it's really protected, everything closed, username and password is enough. Normally it's not enough. I imagine you live this or you've seen this or you hear people talk about it that, for example, you buy a new device and then you go to your bank and it starts complaining that this is a new device, that something is happening, that please has this two-factor authentication, SMS, application. Like, this is something that they want to verify because they detect that something different is happening, right? So what the malicious actors do at that point is that they use that thing that they stole before to send it to the bank now. So what the bank will actually do is check this and say, username and password are correct, and it looks like it's exactly the same device that he always uses. So come in. You are able to do whatever you want now. Congratulations. You want to do bank transfers? Do them. You want to cancel credit cards? Fine. You want a loan? Here it is. So they will allow you to do anything that you want there. And this is a new thing because, again, before maybe like all these institutions were not following this approach of extra security. So it's good that they are doing it, but malicious actors know this and they want to take advantage of this, obviously. So this is what normally we call digital fingerprint theft. So they are stealing this information, and this is a completely new thing. But if we check how this involves in the whole ecosystem, if we go to the dark web to find this is where all this information is being sold for everyone. So normally, if a normal situation of credentials, username and password, they can cost up to $15 in the best case scenario. But when they are including all these identifiers and these fingerprints, the price of these things jumps from 15 to 200, which is a huge increase. And the answer of why it's so expensive is pretty obvious. As I said before, it will bypass many of these protections that all these institutions have. So now, if you buy the 15.1, then you are not getting nothing, because you are not going to be able to really access it. So you have it, but maybe it's good if they are having the same password in another website, and maybe you can try to find a website that doesn't do these protection methods, and it's okay. But if they actually do something more, then unless you have the 201, you have nothing. And if we know something about people, and more specifically about hackers, is that they like money. So they want to try to get the 200 ones. So the next question that we have is like, what is this? No? When I'm talking about identifiers and fingerprints, what is this? So this is our computer. Let's see, this is not a laptop, but this is like the desktop computer. And then when we think of fingerprints, there are many things that maybe you heard about. And one of them is like basic information, what we call basic fingerprinting. That includes things like the screen size. So your screen size is your screen size. So they try to use that information. But as you can guess, there are many people with the same screen size. So they don't only check that, they check more things. Things like the language, for example. So maybe that reduces the cluster of people that has this screen with this language. And in the same way, they can detect many more things on maybe the version of your operating system, the version of your browser, and different small basic information of your computer. But in reality, this thing evolved in time, and obviously hackers were behind it also, which is what we call advanced fingerprinting. And this is what they use, things that they are able to identify or fingerprint your browser, or they are able to identify your device specifically. So here we can get things like what is called canvas fingerprint. So they draw things, and then based on your GPU and your CPU, exactly the way that something is drawn is not the same for one person or the other one, depends on the model of the computer, the year that it was built. So now things we are getting a bit more specific. Then there are what we call WebGL fingerprinting. So in this one is even more specific. So they do complex graphics on your computer. Again, none of this is visual. Like even if I'm talking about creating graphics, complex graphs, and images, this is completely in the background. So it's completely invisible for the user that is on the website. So they create these complex graphs on the website, check the shadows that they are creating, these 3D objects, for example, and then they create a fingerprint of this. They hash it, and they know specifically how this GPU was interacting with it. And sometimes they even use what is called audio fingerprinting. So that depends on the drivers that you have, the speaker that you have in your computer, and don't think individually each of them, but think all of them. So they are actually doing all of them. And right now, for all these malicious actors that we were talking before, more than 25% of them are already doing these advanced ones. So they are not going with the basic ones, they are also going with the advanced ones. So this is changing already, and they are realizing that this is where the power is. And why they are using this? Because benign actors are using them too. So if they want to bypass the system, they need to do whatever they do. So they try to copy the same thing that the legit usage of fingerprinting is done for authentication purposes. So how common is this? Like, is this really common? Is actually doing this? It makes sense it's common, right? So we have been analyzing this for a couple of years already, and we found that in the last 2 years, this doubled. So now from all the malicious websites that we are able to see, like 1 every 4 of them is doing this technique. But more interestingly, if we think about the ones that are more prevalent, the ones that we see more victims in our data sets, we are able to see that not 1 every 4 website is doing, like 50% of them are already doing this. And this is a constant evolution in years. So today is 50%, tomorrow maybe 75%, and in a year it's gonna be 100%. Because if you think about it, it makes sense. Why someone will sell something for $15 if they can get 200 for exactly the same thing, just executing some extra lines of code on them. And we see that even they want to simplify this process, and they want to do this phishing as a service. So there are sometimes these phishing kits that they are already including this, so you don't have to do anything, and they automatically will include this information. So you don't even need to be an expert and understand how to do these kind of things. They are even simplifying it for you. So who are the targets of these people? How are they obtaining and how they are fingerprinting people in this way? So anything related to technology or internet, they want to have it. They want to get any information about this. Obviously, social networks, they care. There's a lot of information from us. They can use it to try to scam or attack other people. So social network is very common. And the biggest one definitely is financial services. Like the financial services normally are the ones that are the early adopters for technologies that allow to protect their customers, which is definitely a great thing. But again, this is a cat and mouse game, and they always try to go in front of it, and the ones that are targeted the most are the financial services. So I hope that when I started talking at the beginning, maybe things were looking a bit blurry, but now that I gave you some nice glasses that things are a bit more clear now. Still, maybe you don't see the full image, but at least you understand a bit more. And after this talk, you will search a bit more about this information. Also, we can talk later on. But now, what now? Like, I've seen this, you told me this, what should I do? So there are two main things here. We can take the user's perspective, and I will give you some tricks in there, but also the company perspective. We have to think as individuals accessing the web, we are all of them, but at the same time, we are also part of companies. And then we have to help the people that is accessing our own websites. So let's start with the user's perspective. I will give you two small hints, but I hope they are useful. The first one is, don't think that you shouldn't use anything. You should use something, and then you should adopt these privacy-enhancing browser extensions. They are different in the market, but you should definitely use them because they will safeguard your digital presence, and they will not allow all these unexpected behaviors that, as I said before, they are very difficult to understand because everything is happening in the shadows, so you don't see what is happening unless you have some tool like the one that we built to be able to understand the whole process. You don't know it, so you need something that will, by default, stop all these trackers and these intrusive elements that you were not expecting when, for example, you are watching your favorite team playing the NFL. Another one that you should take is you try to start supporting online privacy awareness. Like sometimes we think about privacy, sometimes we don't think about privacy, but we have to take an active role because sometimes, I guess most of these people in this room is quite technical, but they have family members, their aunt, their uncle, someone that maybe is not so technical. So we have to teach these people also that these things are happening, that this situation is dangerous, and there can be many implications in their lives now and in the future because of lack of actions in these kind of situations. So when you are taking an active role in these parts, you are not only helping yourself, which you definitely are, but you are also helping all the people around the world to know this and to pressure companies to try to do things properly. But again, let's now think about the companies, right? The ones that people we work with. Right? We have to be an example. We have to give an example in this. So what can we do as a company in this sense? So the first one is offer educational resources and transparency. Like if you don't have transparency, you don't have anything. You have to explain your customers and your users what is actually happening, how you are treating their data, how you are sharing the data. If they don't understand this, they cannot decide what is actually happening. So it's very important to offer the customers and the users a clear view of what is happening. And as I said before, sometimes it's not easy to do because you load 2 scripts and then you're not having 25 on your page and setting this with 37 trackers. So it's sometimes not so obvious. So you need to do the extra effort to understand what is happening and to trigger all these informations to be able to express it to your users and customers. And finally, transparency is very nice, don't get me wrong. But another thing that you have to do is give them choices. Like they should be able to choose what is happening. So give them these granular privacy controls of what is actually happening. So once they understand it in the first step, they should be able to choose what they want to happen specifically. You have to simplify it. You have to allow them to maybe stop some analytics or maybe stop some general tracking or stop sharing information or don't allow to use this information for advertisements. So you should always give your customers not only transparency, which you should, but also an option to choose what they specifically want. And when they have transparency and options, you have a happy customer that will talk good things about you because you respect their privacy, and this is a very important thing that we should give to all our users and customers. So thank you very much. I hope I clarify many things, and now you will think about privacy a bit more after this talk.
All right, we have a little bit of time for a couple questions from the audience, and then I'll chat with Iskander a little bit about the details of his work. Please.
Hey, can you explain a little bit about the connection between legitimate or I should say, what's apparently legitimate advertisers, like big technology companies, and then the threat actors in terms of how, are they collaborating and don't realize it?
This could happen. Like sometimes it's not, like as I said, like the same way that companies are not aware what is happening, sometimes some trackers don't know what is happening either. So these intermediaries that we're talking about, sometimes they do that work without even informing. They are in that website for some other reason, and they know that this information is there. So why they will not take it and then give it to someone else? So sometimes it happens that things are not clear, and sometimes companies share information without really understanding what they are doing. And some other times it's not on purpose, and maybe some intermediate, more malicious, let's say, actor is trying to do this step. So it's not always companies knowing what is happening, as no one is understanding, because again, it's super complex. That's why we build this novel approach to be able to understand what is really happening there.
Go ahead, please.
Hi, thank you for the suggestions on how to safeguard consumers. So I wanted to know, are these intermediaries different from data brokers, from what we conceive of as regular data brokers?
Yeah.
And how can we empower people to confuse the trackers? So maybe going into the developer tools on your device to maybe obfuscate your location, and how can we, I would like your suggestions on how we can just confuse the intermediaries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great questions. So it's not exactly the same. So data brokers are an entity by themselves, but it doesn't mean that they don't collaborate. So data brokers, they can get information from public information there. Like, I don't know, the state is sharing information, they go to the DMV, they go to different information that is available to the public that they can access, but they get information also about this, about all these trackers. So sometimes they collaborate with these tracking companies to know more about you. So maybe in public records, it will show who is your wife or your husband, but it will definitely not show that you like spaghetti or that you like sweets. But this information is something that the trackers definitely have. So data brokers, many times, not all of them, but many of them, they collaborate also with these trackers to get more information. So they are not exactly the same, but they are definitely collaborating with each other. And regarding on how to defend ourselves, as I say, the first thing that we should do is try to not expect that things are going to happen by default. We should have an active role in protecting ourselves. Like the same way that before we're always saying you need an AV in your computer, now you need some privacy protection in your computer, which can be, again, something like a privacy extension that will allow to block all these kind of behaviors. Also, you can hide your location with a VPN or different sets of tools for privacy that we have there.
Let's take 2 brief questions, so that we can also go ahead and discuss a few things more.
Yep.
So the 2 biggest use cases that I recognize for these tracking technologies is, your nation state that's trying to do some degree of surveillance, national security, espionage activity, and then you have your corporate entities who just want to sell all of us more products. Given that those vested interests, where is the policy landscape headed? Do you have any insight or commentary on where we're headed from a regulatory perspective, given that, in short, in lieu of like national or international policy that dictates things like digital identifiers, mandatory digital identifiers, where are we actually headed in reality as far as being able to manage this at the regulatory and policy level?
Yeah, of course. So there are multiple use cases. I don't think there are only these 2 that you were saying. I think there are more use cases, but definitely those 2 are some of the possible options about it. The thing that happens is that regulation is, we know that tend to be a bit behind of technology. Technology is very fast, so it's difficult to keep up the pace. So what happens is that they are trying to improve the situation to control these things. Like, for example, in Europe, we have GDPR that will try to do this. Here in California, we have CCPA. So there are regulations that are trying to control these kind of behaviors from stopping them from happening. Like, many people maybe seen this or these cookie banners that they appeared. That was because of a regulation that was forcing websites to give the users a choice, and they have to actively consent the behavior. Still, we have been studies of this that we can discuss later, but sometimes it's complex to implement, and sometimes there are difficulties because, again, you don't know what is happening, so they don't have a real choice. But regulation is trying to control these kind of behaviors more.
Let's make it brief.
Sure. Sorry, as a user, besides encouraging my friends and family to become more secure, what else can I do to kind of empower a more secure landscape on the web?
I mean, like I would say that, again, one is encouraging people, definitely. And then another thing is to give them the tools. Because sometimes if you can just tell the people that, oh, there's no solution, like the world is going to explode, nothing is going to happen, right? So you have to explain them the situation, but also give them an option, like a tool, like this is the problem, this is the solution. If you go to someone and just explain the problem, you are not solving it. You are just creating a madness. So you need to give them a tool. So you have to explain the situations and give them these options, but also give them tools so they can protect themselves. And if they feel that they are being secure, they will talk to other people too. So at the end, it's like mouth to mouth, something will happen, and people will be able to start getting and improving the privacy of all the people around you and hopefully around the world.
Thank you.
So thank you, Iskander. This is actually published work, so if you're interested in this topic, let's take a seat so we can chat about this a little bit. This is actually published work, so I would encourage all of you to look up the paper, see all the details. I'm gonna probe him on some of the details. So, yeah, there are more, let's say, interesting facts that you can explore by looking at the literature. But in the limited time that we have, I think we have about like 10 minutes or 9 minutes or so. I did want to ask a couple of questions. Let's start with the technical ones, right? So you mentioned ghosted tracking, which I think is a term that you coined and kind of like a thing that you put out in the world for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit what that is? It's kind of a relatively new term and a new like idea, and I feel it's quite fascinating. And while you're at it, I also want to understand something that's not as, let's say, well known in the community, which is this new trend of server-side tracking, right? Because cookies are being blocked by a number of different technologies nowadays, and server-side tracking is looking to like evade that. So can you give us a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah, this is a good question. Like, because actually they are very related, both of them.
Yep.
Because the idea is most of you already heard about that there is this change of paradigm that is happening. Like many browsers are stopping already like third-party cookies or identifiers. Some others are trying to do, but there are some regulations also in play. So things is changing, or advertisers and trackers are thinking that things are going to change. So they are trying to, again, find the next thing that they will be able to somehow offer their services somehow. And the one that we found is this ghosted tracking. So this is a way that, again, when you have a blocker, normally what they will take into account is the domain that this is loaded from and how this is going to be sent there. So if you do ghosted tracking, you can hide yourself as someone else. So again, you are in a website a.com, and then you are a tracker. But then when you are creating your identifiers, as you are in the same context as the website itself, so from the browser point of view, you are a script of the website, even if you, in reality, you are not. So you can create an identifier there. So anyone that will check post-mortem that website and do a forensic analysis, it will just see that that cookie is from the website. So then when they are going to try to block it, there is no way to block it because it's a first-party cookie, for example. So what these people do is take advantage of this behavior that happens in all the browsers. So they do this sometimes in the main page, they do sometimes in iframes of other companies, so they are disguising themselves as someone else. So when these extensions try to block them, if they don't do an advanced protection, they will not be able to detect it, and then will bypass them. Server-side tracking is also a new term, exactly with the same objective, like things are changing, they need something else. So in this case, until now, as we're seeing, all the things that I was explaining happen client-side, like in your own browser. All these decisions are happening in your browser. But server-side tracking is a bit different. And in that specific case, what is actually happening is that they are sending, the website itself is the one collecting everything. So again, this time it's not a third party, it's the website. So they are collecting, for example, when you click something, when you are actually going through the different, things that you want to buy in the website. So they obtain all this information and they send it to their own servers. And once they are in their world, in the servers of the company itself, they get this information and they share it with someone else in the back. So you will not be able to see that is happening, you will not be able to detect that is happening. Again, this is a way to evade the blockage, because this extension will be afraid of blocking things that are legit and they are part of the website, so they are able to block or stop the functionality, break the functionality of the website somehow. So in this way, they are creating these situations to bypass this. And this can be also a good thing in reality, because it will allow also the companies to have full control of what's happening and block behaviors that they don't want.
So yeah, well, so this basically is bringing us to a world where there are no cookies involved with tracking, right? Because it's all happening in the background, which is kind of a good segue to my next question, and probably the last one. There's been a lot of discussion around this idea of deprecating or phasing out third-party cookies, right? I'm not going to name names here, but like this has been something that's been sort of announced, and it's taking longer than we initially thought. So if that happens, there will be some obvious privacy benefits, but like, what are they going to be replaced with, right? Because we can't break the internet by kind of removing the targeted ads and things like that. So what's the plan?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. And there are many options. I think I don't have the crystal ball that allows me to see the future, so I'm not sure what is going to happen exactly. But there are definitely a lot of cards on the table. So again, we're talking about the concept of ghosted tracking. We talked about the concept of server-side tracking. And then there is also another one that is on the table that is try to do things locally. So try to understand the behaviors of the user, everything locally, so that it's not shared with anyone. And then, for example, some external website that want to get this specific information has a more reduced view, because you are in specific groups of categories of people, for example, and there are different implementations of this and different positive and negative things. We don't have time to discuss all the good and bad things there, but that's another option. Try to execute everything in a local environment on your browser, and then people will be somehow able to access groups of people that you are associated with. So they will not be able to specifically know who you are, but they will know something more general about the information of you, and maybe offer some specific products or try to do something with it. So it's less fine-grained, and they are able to track people much less because of this, or that's the idea, at least in the three options.
But the internet economy is fueled by personalization and ads nowadays too, at least to a large degree. Do you think that these kinds of changes might disrupt that model, or how are advertisers, how will they keep making money?
Yeah, that's a good question, definitely. And I definitely will disrupt it, because it's a big change. So big changes have big changes, as the words themselves say. But some things will change, definitely. I think we already seen this, for example, in newspapers. I mean, we got used to go to the internet, so it was fine to go and buy some newspaper and read the news about it. And we got used to, I'm not going to pay for news. They are free online. But maybe this could change. And we are already seeing many news outlets that they are changing this, and they are asking for subscriptions. Sometimes they are not even super expensive about this. So they can change these kind of things. I remember in the past, if you ask 10 years ago to people, they would not even pay to see videos online or to see a movie. But now this changed, and now there are a lot of subscriptions that people is happily able to pay and then receive the same thing in a different way. So there are some changes happening that can be involved with these things. Again, it's difficult to predict the future, but changes will come, and that's undeniable.
It's fascinating. All right, so let's thank the speaker again, and thank you all for being here. I encourage you to engage with Iskander outside, and definitely follow up on his research and his papers. They're fascinating. So thanks, Iskander.
Thank you.